for joining us for another episode of Uncommon Voices, Uncommon Visions. I am your host, Dr. Valerie Nyberg, and I'm super excited to invite my youngest son, Jacob Nyberg, to be with me today. He is the youngest of my three sons. He's currently a junior at the University of Iowa, starting classes in about a week and a half, right? Yep.
Yeah.
And he's studying computer science with an emphasis on machine learning. So Jacob, what inspired you to want to sit down with me today and have this conversation?
I'm a fan of the podcast. I've watched at least 2/3 or 3/4 of your episodes. I haven't seen the most recent one, but I really liked 3 as well as 5 through 8. Wow. I'm just generally a big fan. And beyond that, we also have our own conversations, academic and political conversations. And, I really enjoy those, and we can talk for hours about those things. So I figured why not record them, and then, it could also, be an episode for you. So why not?
Awesome. So in preparation for this conversation, we decided that we wanted to focus on kind of like that navigating adolescence, especially in the 21st century with technology and all the things that are going on in today's youth culture. So kind of for my audience, why don't you share a little bit about your childhood and your adolescence and kind of what interests you in this particular topic?
So, like my mother, I've always been a nerd. I took to gaming at, I would say a young age, but, not that young because, my mother's kind of a little more
strict.
Restrictive about those things. But especially around, I'd say no, I guess I started playing the Wii pretty early.
I
think 5.
Probably somewhere between 5 and 7. So you started playing the Wii, but we didn't get an Xbox until you were 12 or 13.
Yeah, it was around 5th grade. And I really liked the Wii, but the Xbox I think pulled me deeper. But before that, I was always academically gifted to the point where sadly I never had to focus on it. And I never really did until this last semester when I switched my major to computer science. But I did a bunch of other things. My mother got me involved in, a bunch of different sports. I took to soccer mainly, as well as instruments. I started playing piano first, did piano and soccer for around a decade. I also did violin for a few years. I played saxophone for, around 4 or 5 years. Did some Boy Scouts as well. But as I went into high school, gaming was definitely my preferred hobby. And then as an upperclassman in high school, I took more to cannabis. And I started college. When I first went to college, I was majoring in psychology. I do have I did take to social sciences, social studies, and stuff like that a lot more at first. But I decided to kind of really get the most out of my mathematical and science related aptitudes. That's what drove me to switch to computer science.
Okay, awesome. So we've had a chance to share some articles about your generation. I actually even bought 2 books. One is iGen, Why Today's Super Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Completely Unprepared for Adulthood. And my personal favorite title, at least, The Dumbest Generation Grows Up from Stupefied Youth to Dangerous Adults. I will just save my commentary.
Is he talking about his generation?
No, he's don't you wish. He's talking about yours, my friend.
Yeah, of course.
So kind of what do you think makes your generation so much different than previous generations ahead of you and even the generations that are coming behind you?
So I would say the biggest thing is with all the advancements to technology, social media, and the sciences that media in general, and also the sciences that kind of propel those things. Those things took quite a foothold within the last 20 years. So I'd say access to information has gone up a lot. Also, just the you have a wider berth of communication where like you're able to interact with people from further bounds thanks to the internet. I would say that that has also partially increased drug consumption, as well as a few other things that we will talk about later from one of your questions. I would also say that it has led to higher rates of mental illness. I sent you a link from the APA, American Psychology Association, describing how, depression, anxiety, all these things are going up at really high rates over the last decade and a half.
Since the
Some
mid
of them,
2010s. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've had some, I think, like 50% jumps in some cases, up to 70, which is, pretty bad. And I think along with these increases to social media and technology, we've become more incentivized towards short-term gratification and immediate stimulation, which I think is very bad. And I think it's not unique to my generation alone. I think last semester I took this meaning of life class. One of the philosophers that we looked into was this guy named Heidegger.
Mhm.
And he spoke about how technology has always been doing this to us, where we've become inframed, we've become more and more attentive to machines. We wanted to do things more quickly and move on to the next thing as quickly as possible and just get things done. And I also think social media especially has caused us to be less autonomous. We fall into groups more easily that we find online, and we kind of fall into these echo chambers. I'm sure that's definitely not, a new or unique thing that I'm saying. And I think the internet has allowed people to be more anonymous. And I think that's a really good thing, because with the anonymity, you get exposure to deeper personality traits that may not come out in face-to-face interactions
Mhm.
that are more repressed due to social and societal norms. So I think those are the main things with our generation.
So I think I want to, a couple of things, and we've had these conversations informally before. I think your generation saw a shortening of a lot of things. So one of the examples I like to use is commercials. Commercials got much shorter from the time that I had your brother, my oldest son, your brother Isaiah, to your when you were a toddler. That attention span got to about 15 seconds. So I think that primed your brain in a different way than perhaps your brothers had been primed. I also noticed that very early on, these were things that you paid attention to. So as we went throughout the grocery store, you would sing the different jingles. My favorite was the Charmin one. But you paid attention and you absorbed that information much more readily than I think most other generations have. And that also primed you for wanting to get your own phone and that gaming culture and all of those things that are, I think, very much more different than, say, my generation, or even, your older brother, who didn't necessarily have that online presence or that online ability to form groups and get into habits and find interests that were strictly through a portal versus in person. Like, he went outside a lot. He played, he had play dates and lots more of those things than I think you did.
Yes, definitely true. You kind of said two different things, but the thing that stuck to me is the first one about commercials, and how, with shortening of commercials, you get they try to kind of, I want to say stimulate. I don't think that's exactly the right word, but they do it quickly, right? And then they're done and they get out, and then you move on to the next one. I think that's kind of become a really big thing for people. I mean, I like for this generation, for this time, is that you always want to jump in and get them quickly, and then maybe over more time the level of stimulation tapers off a little bit more. Those things are done to like kind of grab your attention quickly.
So, okay, as you know, I'm an educator. So bring me into the classroom. If you are more motivated, or if you are used to being stimulated very quickly and getting your attention and then going off to the next thing, how does that translate to the classroom? You mentioned earlier that you were gifted and not having to really pay much attention to your academics, but how does that play for you and for others like you?
Well, I think it goes beyond academics. I think it goes to any long-term endeavor that could be beneficial, right? Like I think it go to sports and arts and also academia as well, where you have to put in many hours in order to get the competence that you actually want. And it's really hard to do that when you can just go on your phone and get that reward way quicker and way more reliably than you can by putting all this investment in a more long-term goal.
So how do educators, how do teachers, how do parents help their kids to see the long-term benefits of putting in that time and effort when the kid can pick up a smartphone and get that instant gratification?
Well, I think the solution. I think one thing that's very important is to develop those tendencies to, or maybe an interest in a long-term pursuit. I think that needs to be available first before you have that short-term reward, which I think thank God that you did that because then you're already getting this reward, and I feel like it's more satisfying. At least I believe it is.
Can you give an example? Like example from your experience?
From my experience, I would say piano or soccer. I was doing those things. I started, what was it called when I was like 5?
Academy.
Or I guess 4. Yeah. I did like the 4. Academy when I was 4. And I eventually played club when I was 9. So I was doing that for a long time, and I didn't get an iPhone or an iPod until I was in middle school. So I was already, and it wasn't the best, but in middle school, I was like starting to reap the rewards. Because remember at the time, I was really invested. I was going to like 8 practices every week, and we only had 2 for our team. So I was already investing heavily into that. So I wasn't investing as much into Call of Duty, which is something that I really liked at the time.
Yes. Okay, so what I hear you saying is showing kids early on how to invest their time and energy in something that they'll get a lot of benefit from. That's something they pick, because like I think it's important to point out that in our household the rule was you had to do some kind of sport, you had to do some kind of instrument, but kind of what that was and how that worked out was a little bit up to you. Except in your case, I'll go ahead and admit the parent fault is I did not invest time in baseball because we were already involved in club soccer, and doing both was not something I could do. But for the most part, like if you had interest in something, that's what we did. We did something that you had interest in.
See, you said we had to do a sport or an instrument. I don't think we had to, or at least for me, like I just wanted to do it all. Like I saw, Nathaniel and Isaiah, my older brothers, doing these things. And I was like, oh, why can't I? Why can't I? And then when I was finally able to, I was like, yeah, definitely sign me up. I don't think you were really forcing us, at least not me, because I was already on board. And another thing I want to say is that these long-term pursuits, such as soccer and piano, they have a much higher skill ceiling than back to my other example, Call of Duty. In a few months, I was already really good at Call of Duty. In like a year. I also played a ton of Overwatch in high school.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, in like a year and a half, I was a higher rank than 99% of everyone else. I was grandmasters, But for example, chess, piano, soccer, the skill ceilings are way higher and it takes way more investment. And that's why I also think the reward is way better, is because like being better than 99% of people that play soccer is way different than 99% of people who play Overwatch. And I think it's also way harder to get there than it would be for, you know, pressing a few buttons on a controller or keyboard.
So I want to switch the milieu a little bit and talk about TikTok, because as an administrator, I've seen children spend many of their waking hours on TikTok, doing TikToks, imitating TikToks. I don't know what you all call it, but like how does one compete or help kids to transition that desire to be that good at something that is actually much more relevant? Like you mentioned chess, but you didn't actually talk about it. Like you were really good at chess and you played a lot. No, you weren't. I still have your trophies, my friend. I have your trophies, big ones, first places and all of that. So you gotta own that. You know, those are things that we were fortunate enough to get you involved in early. And like you said, your brothers were involved, so they kind of paved the way for you. And that involvement was more natural to you. I think Isaiah and Nathaniel would definitely feel like they were forced, much probably more than you did, because I was like very clear, like, you're going to do this and we're going to do this. And, you know, I don't care what it is, just pick something. But how do you compete with something like TikTok? How do you get a kid to transfer those skills to something else, or that time or energy to something else?
Yeah, I think the problem is like you really can't. And I don't really use TikTok. Well, no, yeah, I don't really use TikTok, but I use YouTube a ton, right?
Yes.
And
You and your brother
something.
Nathaniel.
What?
You and Nathaniel.
Yeah, Nathaniel also really likes Instagram feeds, which are basically TikTok. But the problem I think is that, like, I notice on YouTube, because YouTube actually shows the views, but like these really short videos, you know, 15 seconds, 10 seconds, get millions of views. Whereas, you know, these really longer videos, maybe they get 500,000, but you have an immediate setup, you know, it starts the video somewhere you're familiar with, you're setting up, immediate payoff. Whereas for, say, a chess game, setup takes so long and the payoff is so far away, and it's also not guaranteed. So it's a lot safer of a chance to get that stimulation and that satisfaction from just, you know, watching a ton of these really quick clips that are always going to entertain you. And also, like, TikTok is programmed to give you videos that you want to watch. So it's kind of overpowered. Like, I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, I think
overcome.
one of the things that particularly as an administrator, one of the things that I noticed is we haven't mentioned it, but algorithm systems, you know, TikTok, YouTube, all of these things work on algorithms that take what you view and then amplify. You mentioned earlier the echo chamber. So for like the kids that I see, most of the kids that I saw in my office as an administrator were kids who were often in trouble for one thing or another. But when you look at what they're scrolling through, their fights, their arguments, they're just hyper drama filled, you know, angry kind of outlet behavior that they then, because they're surrounded by it, their friends are involved in it, the social media they're feeding off of is involved in it, then they don't necessarily understand that if I have a conflict with somebody, I can resolve it in a different way than to, you know, fight them or to scream at them, that there are other skills that they can use that aren't as immediate and are more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, honestly. Like, but I mean, I guess my Instagram feed's like half of it is soccer videos, so that does make sense. Gosh, but yeah, definitely. The algorithms like are so attuned to things that you're interested in, and it just feeds it right back to you. So it amplifies it, and it makes it worse in that scenario. So yeah, no, that definitely is a problem where, if there's something bad, like something unproductive or destructive or negative that you are interested in, the algorithm is just going to amplify that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I'm kind of trying to segue because we have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna kind of go into, since we've talked a lot about social media and now we're talking about the algorithm, is all algorithms, is one of the things that I remember most of raising you guys, especially you and Nathaniel particularly, was I started to try to put limits on things, and you guys really didn't like that. I remember when we got the Xbox, I put the controls on so that you could only play it during certain times of the day and a night. And I remember that being a big frustration, specifically to Nathaniel, who was like, "It's not working right," and da da da. Like he was trying to always get me to take the controls off. What like that caused a lot of animosity in our house. I felt as a parent, but in the hindsight, is as you look back at it, like what do you think of those times and that limiting that I did, and how that has impacted you?
Well, thankfully, I've kind of had, since I was young, a clear message that those things are, the value is mostly just face value, and that those are things that need to be moderated. But it's really funny, actually, that you mentioned the Xbox restrictions, because I didn't even know about them, because it's very likely that Nathaniel changed them or took them off. Um, and and beyond that, again, around fifth grade, my brother stopped enforcing your limits. So I was playing Wii like every day. I was playing Xbox at night. My art teacher in elementary school, Miss Leslie, started to hate me because I would stay up playing Skyrim until around 2 a.m. and I would fall asleep in her class. Yeah, you didn't know this. but
Oh
but
my
yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. I know. It was pretty bad.
You would sneak
And
downstairs?
yep. Or we'd like I would be like, oh, it's too hot in my room. I need to sleep in the basement. And that's
Oh.
where the TV and the Xbox was. Yeah, so obviously, that has culminated in me having this quite
Extensive.
extensive, perhaps, gaming and streaming addiction that I continue to struggle with. I told you earlier, I think before you started recording, that this summer, in the last maybe 2 months, I put in like 300 hours in this game called Elden Ring, which is, by the way, amazing. You guys should all check it out. Even though most of you are adults, but still worth. But no, I consider myself addicted. Because if I start, it's very hard for me to stop. And recently I have been able to regain control, but it's very tough for me to moderate these things, because I didn't have to play by your rules, because not your fault, of course. Single mother, you weren't around enough to kind of inspect and be like, oh, I'm gonna check how long he was on the Wii on a weekday when he shouldn't have been playing at all. Because I was for hours. And then, dude, whenever the garage door opened, like that rush to turn everything off and run upstairs, and all this stuff. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
well,
it was very bad. If my brothers had maybe been a bit more responsible, with my development, I probably wouldn't be struggling with games and media as much as I do. But at least I knew that what I was doing wasn't the best.
so okay, let's talk about addiction, because you just mentioned that, and that was that was a word that we talked a lot about through your adolescence in terms of having everything, like understanding that you can do things in moderation and everything should have a place, and that you should prioritize the things that are going to get you, further down the road. But I, especially as you became 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, especially 15, 16, 17,
Yeah.
18, that that conversation got much more difficult to have with you. That the reality that you were doing things that I couldn't necessarily control, playing games, and I remember vividly you waking me up more than once in the middle of the night, screaming at somebody, over your
Oh man.
Xbox, going, screaming obscenities. Let's,
Yes. Yes.
but this notion, like, how obviously you had some limits, some natural limits, and some expectations in the household, but even as you just shared, there were ways around that. Times when I was at work, or times when I was sleeping. How do parents and teachers and people who really care about the development of young folks help them understand that, uh, once you start to form those attachments and those habits, that they can get out of control very easily, and they can deep six what you're actually trying to do that's positive, but yet for the teen it feels so good. Why would you limit it?
Yeah. So I would like to talk a little bit about cannabis, weed.
You can
'Cause
just call it
that was
marijuana.
it- that is such a bad word to, like,
But
honestly.
that's what it is.
No, it's not marijuana. Are you kidding? Like, I'm serious.
Okay.
I'd look into the history around, like, when and why that word was created to just to describe it. I'd rather call it weed or cannabis. Like, come on,
Okay.
marijuana, come on.
Okay.
Sorry. But
Okay, you can call it
weed
weed.
still has a negative connotation. Like, I can
Right.
call it weed. Okay, I think the problem, a big problem was that early on, I learned from Nathaniel or especially from Nathaniel, that, like, you know, I think you're a bit too strict, where it's like, we don't need these limitations. These rules are kind of a bit silly. They're a bit too much. So we don't really have to listen to them, and things are still okay. And I think especially with weed, so, until sophomore year, I remember distinctly freshman year, like, people on the bus talking about weed, and I was like, oh my god, these guys are freaking losers. Like, oh my god, these guys are so dumb. All these things. And before that, I was like, weed's a really bad drug. Like, I'm not going to do weed. That's freaking stupid. All this stuff. And then I tried it, and I was like, holy crap, this stuff is amazing, right? I think you can't come on too harsh. I think you can't just say, like, this is an absolute no. You can't do this for these reasons, because then I feel like if you're overbearing, there's a tendency or a probability that it'll backfire. And if it backfires, you're not gonna be able to control it, because teens have so much freedom, when they get to around 16 to 18, that you can't really stop them from doing some things. And with the way that adolescents are now wired, towards that immediate payoff, towards that short-term gratification, immediate stimulation, it's very easy to pick up a game, or pick up your phone, or pick up a drug or alcohol, which is also, I consider it a drug. But it's very easy to pick up these things because we're kind of being wired that way. So it's really hard to just not have those experiences, to not interact with those things, and if you do, it's also hard to stop. So
So that's a dilemma, because I mean, I don't think, I mean, obviously I'm very anti-drug or anti any of those things. And
of course.
though, I do drink, I drink socially. I'm not, like, I don't drink every day, and I don't drink like, I have my own rules for how I manage that.
Yeah.
So that, um which is very much a part of my personality, and I understand that, my very type A personality. But like, for I don't think that I imposed even on your brothers like this, you abstinence. Like, I don't think abstinence is the answer to anything. But I did harp on you guys that these things were dangerous, that, particularly for you, as I saw you going down the weed, you know, highway, a better word. I was very concerned that you would get lost in that culture, lost in that practice, and I remember having arguments with you about, you're changing your brain chemistry, you're changing the way that your body, it responds to stimulants and these things. And this is dangerous because we have no idea what the outcome is going to be, and how that's going to affect you when you're 25, and right now you're 15. So like, I remember when I found out the first, at least it was for me, in my understanding, was one of the first times you did weed, and you weren't,
Yeah,
getting
that sophomore year when I got
that.
caught. That was my first time actually getting high.
Oh, well, good to know. But I came down on you hard because I wanted you to understand that with that came some very, very real consequences. And I tried to take that line so that you understood that that was a risk that you were taking, and you should not take that lightly.
Yes.
But then as things proceeded, I remember, so I never told you this. The soccer coach, John actually came up to me one day after you had you got your good conduct, that I called up the AD and made you get a good conduct. And he said, I really admire you for how you handled this, because a lot of parents would have just stuffed it and hid it so that their kid wouldn't have to have sat. And I was very conflicted about that, because the result of you having that good conduct was, by the time you were allowed to play again, you were getting less playing time. You were you weren't in the game as long. You weren't, what do you call it when you first
Starting.
you weren't starting.
Yeah.
And it had a lot of negative consequences, which I didn't feel were fair or right, because the right thing would have been to do is put you back into where you were before you got busted, so that you can understand, okay, if these things happen, continue to happen. But instead, what ended up happening was, you got busted and then you got pushed out. That's what I felt at the time, and I was very unhappy with that. And so even though I knew that your junior year, the rest, your junior year particularly, that you were struggling with marijuana and smoking and stuff, and trying to play soccer, I didn't want to give you a second good conduct, because I didn't see the first one. It didn't work the way it should have worked. But I didn't have another way to help you understand the dangers of what you were doing. I
Yes.
feel like I just talked for a long time.
No. It's funny. I was going to transition into what I'm about to say, but then you went on the tangent. But it's still still sets me up pretty well. See, that's the thing. I think one of the major issues is that at the time, you were saying all this stuff is dangerous, all this stuff is so bad, but first of all, with weed, you had no experience, so I felt like you weren't really qualified to tell me that. But but that's not my main point. It's not my main point. Well, no, you didn't know how fun it could be, right? But but the main point is you took a side against me, right? And so instead of me coming to your side, it just made us butt heads. And I was like, no, I'm just gonna double down, and like, now that you're against me, we're gonna fight. So I think really the only way for an adolescent to really understand what they're losing is for them to experience those losses. and under not in the way that I did necessarily. I think it would be really best if, you know, they had these experience of the trade-offs under a supervised condition. So I would say maybe not with weed because it's, you know, illegal, but, you know, with phones or games or even alcohol, because I think that's allowed.
No, it's not allowed.
Can't you like give
No,
your
21,
child a sip
sweetheart,
of drink
21.
at home if they're not leaving? I feel like that's allowed, right?
Oh, okay. At home if they're not leaving, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
That's what I'm
it's
saying.
not really, but
Well,
it's more socially acceptable.
regardless, I think it's really important to. I think the best way that, and it, because I don't think teachers can help at all, because no, you're only with them for 50 minutes to an hour and 10, right? A day, right? That's not long enough to be like, to really, you know, dive into these issues and show the consequences, right? Because you know, the kids aren't even having that experience. You're just getting, you know, told, right? And you know, and you drone on about it, and kids aren't even paying attention. I think no, I think all of the ability to you know, make your child more responsible falls on the parent. And I think the best way for the kid to understand what they're losing is to have that experience, to have some of that experience. And so I think I think it's first necessary that a child has competence and subjectively values at least one field where they're putting in a lot of time investment and they're receiving some positive reinforcements, which I think would have been better if we had a little more positive reinforcements, so that then you can expose the teenager to you know, this desired short-term stimulus, right? And to excess amounts of it. Say like, yeah, I'm gonna let you, you know, do this as much as you want for a week. You can play as much games as you want for a week. Hell, I'll even call out of school. Like, you don't have to do any of it. You know, screw it. No, because here's the thing. When you're an adult, you can do those things. You have unlimited freedom. So an adult can just decide to do these things because, you know, it is so rewarding to them.
Ish.
I know, but you know, still, so you allow a week is a bit much, but you allow them excess access to this stimulus that is only short-term rewarding and is more destructive than it is positive, right? And as a parent, you say yes, like, I understand that you're now free and that you could really do these things regardless of whether or not I can stop you or not. I want you to just see what this is like. And so, you know, just you can go crazy for a little bit, right? And then the kid through excess pursuit of this short-term goal will start to their abilities in, you know, in my case, piano or soccer will start to diminish. And then you can point that out and say, see, like, you've been doing this and I've been allowing it. And now it's making you worse at these things that you've already put so much time and effort in and that you're already really competent at. And on top of that, you're losing the positive reinforcements. So for example, positive reinforcements could be, you know, money for good grades, or ability to you know, to have social experiences, like go out and hang out with your friends, or, you know, car or whatever.
I feel like I did exactly those things and it didn't stop you at all. It just
No, all you did was take the line against me, and that just made me push back. You never gave me access to those things and allowed me.
I can't give you access to
Well, I'm saying like it was always only Xbox on weekends, right? It was like you never allowed me to access those things in a controlled environment, right? And I also didn't have positive reinforcements that I would lose on top of an already diminishing long-term investment that I had going.
For example, like what would be a positive reinforcement?
Positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Again, how about see, I never had it. What's it called when you give an allowance? There we go, allowance. Right?
You didn't have an allowance, but you had a car.
True.
You had a phone.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
you had all the goodies.
Any of those things. I think a phone, I think a phone is perfect, actually. Thank you for saying that. Imagine, right? I'm gonna allow you to have this phone completely free because you're doing these things right, right? And then I'm going to allow you to do these short-term pursuits, right? You can, go have some friends over, and I'll allow you to drink, and
Well, as a school
I don't
administrator,
know.
I'm never going to be able to do. I was never going to be able to do that. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, I know, but other parents, just hush hush a little bit. I mean, I know parents who are completely fine with more than alcohol and even more than weed.
Oh, I
Um,
know. I'm
yeah.
I am aware. I am
Mhm.
especially as a school administrator. I am
Mhm.
aware.
And also just be like, yeah, you can, like, you have good grades, like, you don't need to do your, like, I'm not going to make you do your homework. You already know that that's something you should be doing. I'm just going to let you play on your phone all night, right? And then when the grades are consistently, right, because it takes more than a day for your grades to drop, but when the grades start to drop, or when you're not doing as well in your piano lessons, or you're playing poorly in soccer, you're saying, okay, now you're losing this positive reinforcement, which would be like, I think phone is a really good incentive for kids these days. So perhaps phone, right? And so now you're losing this, and you're also worse at something that you're already getting rewards from. I think, see, that puts you on the side of the kid, where, and I think that's really important, because if you're taking a side against the kid, then they're just going to fight back, and it's not going to work, like,
So
or
no,
at least not in my case.
I do see your point in terms of like even, and I'll go back to being like the school administrator. One of the things that in my last position as a high school principal, one of the things that I was really understanding or coming to understand as part of school discipline is like if you villainize that kid, if you absolutely double down and go, you're a bad kid, you've got bad grades, you've got bad attendance, you tell
No, you're
all
just
them
going to
all
act
the
like a
things
bad
that they're
kid.
right, that they're doing wrong, and you don't actually ever sit down and have a conversation with them and say like, help me understand, why aren't you going to class, help me understand, where are you struggling with your academics, so what help do you need, and really have those personal conversations where you're trying to help them solve what's going wrong, so that the behaviors you're seeing can actually diminish over time because they're getting more of what they need to be successful in those ventures, and they don't have to act out, they don't have to run around, they don't have to hang out in hallways and do those things. That was really what professionally, that's really where I think we need to go with adolescents, because otherwise what we're doing is we're just telling them no, 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 stop, 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 stop. And we're never, I mean, I used to say that as a parent and as an administrator, all I say all day long is no, stop, can't, don't. It's like having a 2-year-old, but they have much more language, they have much more agency, and they have many more words to throw back at you. And it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel good for the adults, it doesn't feel good for the kids, but yet we keep getting caught in this power struggle that is never ending, because we can't just sit down and talk. I mean, I think one of the things that I did try to do when you were going through all of that was I did try to have those conversations with you, and sit down and have, what is going on, why are you doing these things, I'm not quite understanding. Can you share a little bit more, particularly, I know that weed is fun, but like what once you got into that, what made you keep doing it? And then, you branched out. I mean, people say that weed is the gateway drug, and I believe that is an accurate statement, because the people that you buy the weed from also have the other things. And I'll just use my own example. When my mother took me to buy weed with her when I was like 11, 12 years old, the guy tried to sell us rock cocaine, crack. He's like, I got some rocks. And we're like, she was like, I don't know what rocks are, don't want rocks. But like, when you don't, those people have more than those things. So I know we have talked informally about the fact that you also taken pills and done some other things. How do you, why? I guess I'm just going to ask you why.
Um, well, definitely the stimulation from weed was good, right? And so I definitely enjoyed that. Also, I so that made me want to do it more, right? And then also to doing so, you're more frequently in company with other people who are doing the same thing, so it gets easy to get trapped in this cycle of, oh hey, like, are we hanging out after school again, are we smoking again, or during school.
Yes, by the way, I tracked your car as it moved on campus from one spot to another, so I knew about that, just so you
Yeah.
know.
I don't know. It gets really easy to fall into a cycle, and then maybe you're doing it enough and around other people, and you are right, where like the people who are doing smoking weed are also not afraid of trying more stuff. Yeah, and so like eventually, of course at first it was like, nah, I'm just chill with weed, right? But over a year or two, it was like, oh, like, yeah, sure, I'll try that. Yeah, I'll try that.
What were the that's that you tried?
Zans, Yops. You know what Yops are?
No.
Dude, I only did them once, but I took like 6, which is like a lot more.
What is a yop?
I think it's like Molly and meth. Yeah, something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I started with like 1 or 2. And then I like, after 30 minutes to an hour, I was like, oh, I don't feel it. Maybe these are fake. So I just took the rest. Yeah, and it took 24 hours to kick in. But yeah. Yeah.
You know how lucky you are?
Yes.
Which by that you mean no. No, seriously, like people die doing things like that.
Yeah, you're right. I'm also really okay. I'm also really lucky in that I was always told that if you take Xans like 3 times within a week, you'll get addicted. And at one point, I took Xans every day for 1 week. I never did Xans very often. Like, maybe like 3 instances where I did, and one was where I took them for a week, and then when I got a DUI, and then just once more beyond that. I think I'm really lucky that I didn't get addicted. I think I personally, it's kind of hard to say. I think I'm addicted to like stimulation, where like it's hard for me to stay like for example, didn't have to. I'm fine not doing Xans. I'm fine not smoking. I'm fine not playing video games, right? But I feel like I always have to be doing something, right? Something that's stimulating me. I think that's like something that I struggle with, and I think that's something that a lot more people of this generation are also struggling with. And I think that's also why getting into drugs and alcohol and stuff like that is a lot more is more common. And you and I looked at marijuana consumption rates, and I think it's a bit of a bit low.
Oh yeah.
I think it's really low compared to like,
the articles that you sent me were they basically said, oh, from 12 to 18 it has an increase, and I'm like, oh, that's crap.
yeah, it's a load of crap.
Right. No, as a school administrator, when the last car search I did, I found, I think, no less than 5 different torches of different sizes in this kid's car. And what are torches used for? Melting wax.
Yeah. I'm surprised you knew that.
Well, because I have law enforcement with me. That's why.
Okay.
I wouldn't have known that.
Like, oh, this guy must be like
right, like
an arsonist. Like Must
I
go
mean,
camping
that's
a lot. Likes to
right,
smoke
right.
pot.
Like I would never have known, but I had an SRO that did the search with me, and I searched the car physically, and we were just like, and he was explaining to me what these things were used for, and I was just flabbergasted that this kid was running around with a car with a bunch of flammable things. So if he got in a car accident, like who knows what could have happened because of that, and B, that like parents just don't know what the paraphernalia every year changes
Yeah.
drastically.
Yeah.
And the parents are just not aware. Like I remember when vape, the little what do they call it,
Carts.
the brand name,
Cool.
Jules. Yeah,
Okay.
Jules, when they became like, we thought they were USBs, oh, the kids just saving their work. Wrong.
Yes. I have all F's, but I'm a really good student. I like to keep all my work with me at all times. Can I go to the bathroom and hit it, please?
Right, like and I've had so many reports, not so many, I shouldn't say so many, but I've heard reports of students sitting in class vaping openly with substitute teachers, with their teachers. Okay,
Yes, dude. My senior year, Mr. Witt.
Mr. Who?
Mr. Witt. He was
Yeah.
he's a math teacher, dude. My senior year, there was a freshman hitting a Juul just open in the class in front of the teacher, and oh my god, so awful, like so bad. Like, what? Like, oh my gosh. Like even I like, I'll go to the bathroom, man. Like, come on. At least I'm decent enough to not do it right in front of them.
Yeah, but you did have,
I mean, no, it's not like people didn't know what was going on.
Well, no, I don't think I honestly don't think the adults knew what was going on. The kids knew what was going on, but the adults didn't necessarily know.
I think in my case, it was very clear because you also told them. Like, I mean, I know that like quite a few of my teachers knew, either because I was, gone in the bathroom for 20 minutes every day, or I wasn't even showing up, or I was showing up and I smelled really bad, or like, a number of different things.
Well, yeah, for your case, yes, I tried, but even then that didn't even work, because I had one teacher who called me after 5 o'clock at my desk at work to tell me that you admitted to smoking during school hours. And I go, well, why didn't you tell the administration? And he said, well, I understand what happens to Black males in the justice system. And I'm like, but he just broke a law. He broke school rules. He broke laws. He admitted it. And you're not holding him accountable. So I'm the only one who's trying to hold this child accountable. I need your help. And I mean, I spent a lot of, especially the last part of your junior year and your senior year, trying to find ways to get you busted so that you could understand that what you thought was fun was way out of control.
I don't know, man. I think, because I remember being in the principal's office, having sold someone a vape.
So you sold someone a vape? You
on
sold
campus.
someone?
Yeah, and it was on camera, and I was in the principal's office, and they called you, and you told them to search my backpack.
Yes.
And he didn't.
Right.
Let me go. No, but I
don't even think you got suspended for that.
I don't think law enforcement was the way.
Huh?
No, I didn't get suspended.
Right.
Okay, but as far as authorities go, I because you involve law enforcement, you involve like higher authorities, then you just expose the child to more destructive people and more destructive behaviors. I really don't think that's the way. I think if I had gotten in trouble like that, I think things could have gone way worse for me.
I don't know. I mean, because at the time, at least from my perspective, and again, you were my quote unquote most out of control adolescent. Out of the three of your brothers, you were the one who was doing the most dangerous things and seemed to like have nothing go wrong for you ever. And it was a major difficulty with our relationship. And I don't know. I still struggle with that. Because
You
you
send
know,
a kid away, you send a kid away and they come back way worse. Every time that happens, they come back worse.
well, I'm not saying send you away. No, I
Well,
don't
I'm
want
saying
to.
like eh, any like you send them to a camp, you send them to Tate or like one of the bad kid schools. You like you know get police authorities involved. Like I don't know what happens with police when you're underage. They like put you in. They don't put you in jail, do they?
Well, no. Okay, so let's just use your driving under the influence that you got the day that you graduated. Technically, what they should have done was taking you down to process you, and you should have sat in jail.
Yep.
At but
Yeah, I should have something
instead,
like
and I
that.
don't know if it was because he was a park ranger cop
I
or
think it's
not.
just. I think I was like I was. I think I was fully honest and cooperative, and that's why, honestly.
Well, yeah, that's where he should have taken you, but he brought you home instead, which
Yeah.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, I just I again, I think we kind of we've explored this option or this conversation about as far as we can go. But
Yeah.
I think I don't necessarily disagree with you that introducing more harm is the right way to go. But I also think that really having you understand the depths of the choices that you're making um, is important. So I'll just segue to kind of like to when I moved to Ames and you didn't move with me. That was introducing you to more harm. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know who you were going to hang out with or who, and I knew that, most likely you were going to be couch surfing with people who are not the kind of people I would want you to be with. But at the same time, like, I just knew that you weren't going to listen to what I had to say or follow the rules or the boundaries that I was trying to create that was going to keep at least me out of trouble, and not because I didn't want to get in trouble with you, and you were blowing past that. So I had to say, okay, you're not moving with me, and that was super hard because the chances of you continuing further down that path were super high at that moment, and I knew that, but I didn't have another resource. Thoughts about
Yeah.
that?
I mean, the only reason that was the right choice was because you raised me the way that you did. Like, yeah, I did have chances to stay with people that would have taken me down a way worse path. And I'm really glad that I didn't. Like, that would have been, gosh, that would have been awful. I think, yeah, I think it was the right choice for you, but that it's super high risk, super high risk, and thank God that I found other places to stay, because
Yes.
if I had, yeah,
No.
it could have gone bad.
Yeah, it absolutely could have. And I remember the one parent, the mother daughter that you stayed at that was around the corner from us, and her, the mom was just like super upset with me, like, you're not taking responsibility for your child. And I'm like, no, I am, but my child is 18 years old. My child is doing things he shouldn't be doing. And I kept telling her, if your child is hanging out with my child, your child is doing these things too. She's like, oh no, not my daughter. And I'm like, okay. But again, like, the point that I was trying to make was, I'm not going to put my head in the sand and pretend that these things are not happening because you're a good kid. I couldn't put my head in the sand, but at the same time, there weren't any options, or there weren't any resources that I could get a hold of that were going to help you. Like, I remember that one of the things that you had to do was take a substance abuse class as part of your OWI. And I was like, great, that's awesome, because then he can hear from another source, the dangers of what the stuff does to your brain and to your body, and all those things. And those were the kind of resources I was really trying to get you connected with prior to, but just couldn't get, I just couldn't get them. And I think that's one thing as we go forward as a society, particularly since your generation and the kids coming behind you are going to be more and more and more and more susceptible, that those things need to be folded into our schools. Those things need to be folded into the resources that teachers and parents and communities develop, so that when kids have these issues, parents aren't just trying to navigate them by themselves, and they're not forced to push their kids out to say, okay, well, I've got no other options here. Figure it out on your
Mhm.
own. Yeah, it's dangerous. It's
No,
dangerous.
it is. It is.
It's
And I
heartbreaking.
can, I'm completely agree that schools especially need to have those resources, and they need to start educating kids when they're young. I wouldn't necessarily say about drugs. I'd say maybe some fear tactics at first. That really has a tendency to backfire around, that 15 age. Oh, oh man, other kids start way sooner,
Oh my,
but
yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't.
No,
But
no.
so yeah, that eventually has a tendency to backfire. So maybe fear tactics when you're really young, further education as you continue to develop. Um, I think as a parent, the best thing that you can do is be as accepting and understanding as you can. So at least the kid's not going to lie to you like I always lied to you, right? At least you have some awareness of what's going on.
You didn't
At least,
always lie to me. You didn't always.
yeah, well, yeah. At the end, I didn't, because you were trying to be a bit like more. I don't know. Well, not. I don't know. I don't know. I think it was kind of futile at that point because you already knew. Uh, but I think being accepting is good. I think having a clear tie, a clear connection between the freedoms that adolescent has, the privileges that adolescent has, and why they have them. I think having a connection is like, oh yes, you have this car because this, you have your phone because this, and so that way you're saying like when you will, like when these things eventually can start to happen, you start to say, oh, like, and remember, it has to be acceptable. Like I think it is best if the parent can expose the child to these things. Maybe not weed, wink. Um,
You're like,
but
no.
everything else though.
Okay, so you're gonna expose your child to sex? No.
Okay, not sex. I don't think kids are going around just having sex all the time, and that's the reason that they're not, doing home. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay, it's hard to have sex for like 5 hours every day. I think it's a lot easier to be high 5 hours every day, drunk 5 hours every day, gaming 5 hours every day, on your phone 5 hours every day. I don't think you can really have sex 5 hours every day.
True that. Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna change topics now that we've gone down
Challenge
that
accepted.
road.
Yeah, sorry.
So, one of the things that we've talked about a lot and is bared out in the literature is the increase in anxiety, depression, and like this mood disorders and those things. How do you, why do you think this is occurring, and how do you think adults can help young folks navigate these waters?
I think there's a strong tie between addiction and mental health issues.
Mhm.
I think there's a very strong tie there. You see really similar trends. I know from my social psychology class that the more spent on social media, the higher chance, or the more mental health issues you're going to have, or you're going to face. I know continuous use of weed tends to do the same thing. Same with alcohol. I even sent you something about obesity, although that's a bit more difficult. It doesn't necessarily correlate with like, oh, I love eating food and I eat food all the time. There are more reasons that to be overweight than just that, but there's also the same correlation there. And again, also the societal perception and things like that also have a factor there. So maybe not that one, but you can see correlations between all these things where people are likely doing more excessive quantities of a certain thing lead to more mental health issues. And so I think that's why you're seeing such a jump, is because people are hooked on their phones, or hooked on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, especially, on weed, on alcohol, on various other drugs, on all sorts of things. I think the jump in mental illness actually tells more about what's really going on in this generation, because the jump is huge.
Right.
And the surveyed results aren't as significant as the jump in mental illness. And I think also we need to start looking into social media addiction. I think that's not there isn't as much study going on there as there should be. And I think that's something that needs to be incorporated in education as well, is managing time on your phone and on Xbox and whatever.
So again, I'm gonna go back to help kids do that. Do you think, like for example, Snapchat this last week just announced their family center, and the way that works is parents have to create an account, and then they have to join the family center, and then their child has to also join the family center. So both have to opt in for it to work, and then parents get a list of who their kid is chatting with. They don't get the contents or the conversation, but they get a list of who their kids chatting with. And in the mind of Snapchat, at least the press that they've put out, is they liken this to your kids have friends over, who those friends are, but you're not necessarily listening to the conversation. So they're trying to provide that anonymity, or not that anonymity, but they're trying to provide that space for adolescent development to happen without having the parent just right there.
But there's still some supervision.
Right. There's still some supervision, but I also think that more and more I'm hearing, because these days I watch a lot of the Today Show and things like that, more people talking about that. More parents are having those conversations about when do they introduce like the smartphone to their kids, what limits do they have. I think the one thing I was really happy about with your adolescence is you did let me track your phone. You knew I was tracking your phone. You knew, like, you didn't have a choice but the car. I put it in the car, and I put it in a place where you couldn't find it. So like I knew where your car was, and when your phone and your car separated, I knew those times, and I would text you like, I'm confused. Why is your car in one place and your phone another place? But you were much more receptive to that kind of monitoring. Your brother, on the other hand, was very not receptive to any kind of monitoring, which was, it's hard to have those conversations and have that rationale when you have someone who's trying to become their own person, and you want them to have that autonomy to do those things, but you also want to make sure that they're doing it in the safety. Like you said earlier, it's better, in your opinion, it's better for the parent to introduce like the alcohol or whatever to the kids in a safe environment than the kid to go out and find it on their own and not have any supports or any help in that. What do you think about these parents having more of those controls and more of those avenues to monitor and even limit to some degree kids' access? Like, I never took your guys' phones at night. I probably should have, and I thought about it many times, but I didn't really necessarily want to have that fight. But it might have been something I should have done.
The thing about Snapchat, that whole family thing, I think that's kind of silly. Like, if you'd seen my Snapchat, like, you just would have gotten this huge list, and you wouldn't know anyone. Like, I don't think it helps very much, because like, oh, okay, he's talking to Nick and Ashley. Like, who's Nick and Ashley? like I don't think it really helps much. Like, because if you're having someone over, at least you see them, you get to say hi, you get to see what they're wearing, you get to put together at least some idea of who this person is, rather than just reading a name. I don't think it's that effective.
I agree.
I think it's good. I think it's good, perhaps. It's not overbearing either on the child. I think some of the tracking apps like Life 360, I think those things, it's kind of hard because the kid feels like he has, the kid, it seems like the mother's always at the parent is always at their shoulder, like they always know what's going on. And that can be really frustrating for a teenager. I also don't like what real, like, I don't know. There doesn't seem to be like, yeah, where I was sometimes, I guess, like, but you weren't able to control anything, like it
Right.
didn't really help. And in fact, it just made me like more upset, right? So like I don't really know. I honestly think it's best to just acknowledge the adolescent's freedom. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to stop it. Like if the kid wants to do these destructive behaviors, they're going to do the destructive behaviors. And if you try to fight it, they're just going to fight back, and it's going to ruin your relationship. As it did with ours for a couple of years. I don't think battling it is the healthiest or the best way to go about those things. I think it's best to acknowledge the freedom, and I think it would be best for the parent to guide the kid's exposure, because eventually they're going to run into these things. They're going to have exposure to these things, and it would be way better if there was a parent to be like,
So
oh,
how do you,
hey.
okay, but how does a parent guide their exposure? Because once you give a kid a device, unless you put controls on it, you can't guide it. So
The
like,
controls are awful.
Well, this is a little bit of an unusual turn of events. As it turns out, the original conversation with my son got cut off. We hit pause, and apparently I didn't hit record for the rest of it. In the remainder of our conversation, which was another 10 or so minutes, we talked about the growing interest in the meta universe and how navigating those spaces with your children is really important to know kind of what they're doing and provide that in real time guidance to them. We also talked about, again, controls are helpful to us as adults, but are not necessarily helpful to adolescents as they really want to explore and have these experiences. So having that open conversation with your child or your children, kind of like what I was doing with my son, is one really great strategy that even if you disagree, you can come back to the table and you can reestablish that connection and really try to work on these things together, because you are working with your children and on your children's behalf. They don't necessarily always understand the perils of what they're doing, but having that open communication and having that ability to set some boundaries early on prior to them getting involved is really, really important for their eventual development and well-being. So this has been another episode of Uncommon Voices, Uncommon Visions. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Nyberg. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to like, share, or comment. And thank you so much for your time.